Welcome. Happy Norse-vember, everyone. If you're not familiar with Norse-vember, it's an amazing annual event with authors, bloggers, content creators, and fans of all things Norse, where we get together and celebrate different facets of the culture. You can find all kinds of content under the hashtag Norse-vember, like November, but Norse. I'm happy to be here today with two other amazing authors to talk about our work and Norse myth in general. I won't waste any time, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Genevieve?
Hi, I am Genevieve Gornichec. I'm the author of The Witch's Heart, a reimagining of Norse mythology centering the giantess Angrboda.
And I am Lyra Wolf. I have a series, The Nine Worlds Rising, which is also a Norse reimagining, but this one centers on the point of view of Loki and all of his antics.
And I am Kat Rector. I wrote The Goddess of Nothing at All and Epilogues for Lost Gods, which is a retelling from Sigyn's point of view, Sigyn being Loki's other wife, and it is dark and promises to make you cry.
Can confirm.
Yeah, can confirm as well.
So we have a couple of topics that we wanted to cover today. We were thinking first to start talking about the material. So each of our books contain a deeply different approach to the material than everyone else's here. I'd love to discuss what led you each to approach the material in that way and what was important to you while you were doing that.
For me, I took a different approach as far as I did more of a what if type of retelling. So, mine is very much kind of takes a lot of creative liberties, let's put it that way. I just tried to take the myths and then repiece them of well, what if this is, what could have happened with this way, or maybe this is how, Ragnarok started this way. It kind of became really fun just to kind of reinterpret some of the myths that, in this way. But yeah, so I guess that was kind of my main approach with that.
Well, I know that I have really enjoyed that about your work is that it sticks to the myths, but it also is very creative with it. I remember reading it and being like, okay, this is going in a direction that's making me engage with this in a less serious, less academic way, because that's what I was doing for a long time, and I had so much fun with it because of how at moments it's lighthearted, at moments it's dark-hearted, is that a word? But
yeah.
You play with things in a way where I don't get to anticipate what's going to happen next, and I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. That was kind of hopefully, that was my goal. And just again, like you were kind of mentioning, I did want to bring out, Norse mythology. It's dark and it's fun, and that's what I tried to bring out, and just in a different way. Because so much of it's missing, with the original sources. So there's a lot you can do.
And Genevieve, what do you think about how you came to yours?
I came at mine very academically, perhaps to a fault. Let's just throw that out there. Yeah, my whole approach to it was kind of, okay, we have our main corpus of myths, right? And they can kind of be arranged in this chronological order. And so here are the bones of a story. But like Lyra mentioned, there are so many gaps in our knowledge. There's so much we don't know. So my approach to writing Angrboda's story was to be okay, what if all the myths happened exactly as we are told they happened, but these are the things that were kind of going on behind the curtain.
Uh-huh.
So you get references to the different myths in The Witch's Heart, mostly because they're being told to Angrboda secondhand, because she's just kind of hiding in a cave.
Yeah.
And I combined her with several other figures from Norse mythology and created this character that was accidentally very powerful. And then I was okay, what kind of person would she have to be to not use that power to thwart Ragnarok? Avoid it completely. But the academic in me was no, you have to follow the story. Ragnarok has to happen. So I had to find a way to make it at least a little bit satisfying when everybody dies at the end. And that is not a spoiler.
I mean, that's the thing, is that if you are writing a Norse myth-based book and everybody doesn't die at the end, I mean, it's definitely not a spoiler, because if you know anything about it, most people die at the end. I assume Lyra's books are going to just, like, at the end be like, well, we did it finally.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I have plans.
Yeah, you kind of did something similar there at the end of The Goddess of Nothing at All.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that? Talk about your approach?
It does do a Ragnarok.
Did a Ragnarok.
Yep. I think my approach kind of falls in the middle of the two, because I did come at it like with an academic mindset, but in the sense that, like, academic for me, not academic for, like, I have a master's of arts kind of academic. I could not compete with that. I remember sitting down with, like, all of the stories on little, like, post-its and arranging them and trying to get them in the right order and be as, like, strategic as possible, placing things like, well, in this it says directly that Thor has a hammer, so this is obviously after the Thor hammer story. So, like, just weeks of me just sitting there organizing shit based on tiny incremental details. And
I
as
did
well,
the same thing. Yep.
I had goals in mind. So I did, like, there are definitely things that I twisted or nudged in a particular way to, like, fit this narrative where, like, I'm exploring things from Sigyn's point of view in a sense of, like, well, they may be the villains, quote unquote, of the story, but, like, everyone has their, like, they're the hero of their own story. So, like, what has to happen here to get me from her being happily married to this wild maniac of a person to being, like, doing a Ragnarok? I think what is interesting about the material is how many gaps there are and how much flexibility that gives for, like, interpretation, because it's clear that, like, a lot of people have interpreted the myths as, like, a heroes versus villains story, where I don't quite see that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's really pretty much everyone in a way is morally gray. I mean, they're human. It's very human, these stories and these figures, and that's what has always drawn me to them.
Right. I agree. And also, like, you know, all three of us are like Kat had mentioned, like, writing from the perspective of, like, kind of like the outsiders to, like, the main group, the gods. Like, and it kind of, like, the gods don't always look great all the time, and that's true for the myths too, but that doesn't mean that they're, like, villains, right? Like, they have reasons for doing the things that they do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, especially, like, even Odin.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always a reason, though, for everything that he does.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it great? But there's a reason.
I think Odin, there's a lot of opportunity there, because, like, he is a character that, like, a lot of people do respect Odin, and, like, whether you're talking about, like, secular or religious kind of respect. But as well, he has proven in a lot of different places to be kind of, like, he's trying to stop the end of the world, and as well, you can see moments where he's doing things that are, like, self-serving.
Yeah. And also, I always felt it kind of shows that he's a very anxious god. Like, there's, like, a lot of, like, I feel like anxiety in him, which again, I feel like humanizes him. And that I found that very interesting to play around with.
Yeah, I've kind of interpreted him as a bit of, like you watch shows, and the king is usually, like, the most anxious person in the room, because he's got so much going on. He's got to make everything work and anticipate all these things. And I've always seen Odin in the same kind of way. And speaking of outsiders, that was something that was important to me and my approach of the book, not just for the characters, like the main characters themselves, like Loki and Sigyn, but Norse myth has an incredible cast to work with, and there's a lot of characters that don't have any background. You don't know anything about them other than their name, and you can't even be sure that they existed. But for me, I wanted my cast to be mostly made of, like, outsider characters, in part because I feel like Thor and Odin have had a lot of spotlight over the last several years. Did anything like that play into your creations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it was important to show more, like, again, like Loki's side of the story, because you know, there are some that exist, but at the time when I started, there weren't that many point of view stories from Loki's point of view, and also ones that brought in like his relationships, especially like with Sigyn. So like that was really important to me, especially showed that relationship, and also his relationship with Odin, because that's also I didn't encounter again at the time when I started writing this in 2017. Many, you know, reimaginings or retellings with exploring that as well. So those, I think, for me, I mean, I kept my cast a little bit smaller, I feel like, than other people, but that's because I really wanted to focus on those relationships.
Makes sense. I at the time of writing The Witch's Heart, which was 2011, I, at least in like the circles that I was sort of in at that time, like I was seeing a lot of stuff about Sigyn and a lot of like appreciation for her. And I wasn't seeing that much about Angrboda, so that's like part of what inspired me to write this story in the first place. And I know that that's maybe I don't know if that's still the case now, because I kind of like drew away from like Norse online spaces kind of around that time, because while I was writing The Witch's Heart, like I wanted to just use the Eddas. Like I didn't want other people's like interpretations to affect mine, because like we've kind of like talked about, like there aren't a whole lot of sources, and sometimes it can be really hard to distinguish like, okay, what is like actually in the Eddas versus like what is something that like just has been circulating online to the point where it is kind of like taken as truth, right?
Exactly.
And a good example of that is like Loki having red hair, which is like a very, very popular UPG. It's a very popular interpretation of Loki. It's not in the Eddas anywhere, but it's become like so kind of like widespread that like people are just kind of like, okay, this is like what Loki looks like. Granted, Loki's a shapeshifter, obviously, but I don't know, that's something that I keep in mind, or that I was keeping in mind like when I wrote it. It's like I can play around with anything I want, but I was trying to avoid what other people were doing.
Yeah. And I appreciated the shade of hair that you chose for Loki. Because I remember, because I actually had to like really spend a lot of time thinking about hair color choice as well.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, blonde was up there because I was reading like all we have is that he was handsome, and according to like in Norse, you know, blonde was handsome. So they're saying it's very likely maybe blonde. And so again, it was very interesting. So I really appreciate that you chose that hair color.
I definitely I went with the red because I do like that as like the imagery is great. But I've had a lot of people comment to me that as they're reading my book or someone else's book and the hair is not black, they have to like readjust their imagining of Loki because all they're doing is picturing Tom Hiddleston 24/7, which I think is accurate and interesting.
I have been tagged in so many reviews where people have said that they pictured Loki as Tom Hiddleston, and I said, like, literally picture any of them however you want. Like, it is, because a lot of people are coming at our books with, like, their own, like, interpretations of the gods, their own vision of what they think the gods look like, and, like, it does not bother me if you want to picture them other than the way that I wrote them. If you want them to be your versions of them in your head while you're reading, like, far be it from me.
Oh, exactly. And also, like, I've told readers, like what you said, you know, Genevieve, like, Loki's a shapeshifter. You can have any Loki variant you want.
Yep.
Fine by me.
I think as well, coming back to a previous point about finding your material online and having your material be, like, affected by non-ETA materials. Like, it was really interesting for me while I was doing my research, having only limited access to, like, what I can get my hands on. There's no, like, academic libraries for me to access. So, like, there were probably some things that I did not get around to reading. But trying to learn about especially the faith side of things and making sure that I was being respectful while I was writing these books, it was really hard to find information, especially on like traditional magics and things, while not like completely absorbing modern day practices. Like, there were so many things that I was looking for facts, and there's just so little of that.
Right. 100%.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was really grateful for, like, you know, Dr. Jackson Crawford's channel. Because at least that did allow a little bit of like some of more of the academic actual sources, to have access to that. Because otherwise, like you said, I also found that a challenge. Because otherwise, you're just kind of finding anyone's, Tumblr page, and that's maybe not the best source.
No. All right. So for anyone familiar with the mythology, it's indisputable that a lot of Loki's life revolves around his family. So I'd love to discuss everyone's individual approaches to spouses and children, because we all went in different directions.
Oh, yeah. Like wildly different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, none of us are wrong. Like, objectively.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And I do think one thing, though, that we all have, though, binding us together, I mean, and you can disagree with me, I do feel like we did retain it's complicated.
Yes.
Yep. Relationship status, it's complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know for me, that was, like, my driving force with, like, coming up with the family dynamics. And I actually had a lot of fun with the dynamics of that family, but also it's very sad as well when you get really into it and just the pain there. And sometimes it's like, wow, I didn't know I was going to have to open up this door of trauma and go and explore this. But then it, just it's what it is. I mean, how else, can you explore this? Yeah, I really have to say, just exploring his family has been really a highlight for me with this series.
Well, I certainly know that there are things that you have done that I will never forgive you for with this family.
But
we can still be friends, and I can just still not forgive you for that.
That's okay. I mean, there's things I don't forgive you for either with yours.
You know what? I feel like that's probably the general feeling in this group, is we are already enemies.
And also Genevieve, because that scene. Mm-hmm. I still think about it, and it still makes me so mad.
Are we talking about the river scene?
Yes. Yes.
There's so many.
That was so hard.
There's like 3 times a year that I will cry to a book, and The Witch's Heart, that was one of them.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Evil.
I cried during both of your books too, though, so I'll send you my therapy bills. So
we'll just trade.
Expect that. Just DM me your address, and I will send you my therapy bills.
That's fair. That's fair.
We're really making Loki's family and Norse myth sound so fun.
Yeah, no, our books, very light, very soft and romantic.
Yeah. No pain ever.
Nope. Put away your tissues.
Yeah. But I think that's something that we all did do, the difference, finding different sources of pain. I think we each showed a different, like, angle of a diamond of that trauma or of that family's suffering. I don't know. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
I think what is interesting to me at this point is, like, I can't really personally imagine a way to work with the mythology as it is and have a nicer outcome for these poor people. Like, I would love to see a version of it that's still somewhat accurate and everybody's happy.
Yeah, but that will never happen. I understand. I feel the same.
If somebody does that or like has pulled that off, I want to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, because here's the thing, like there's no one right answer to like any of this, and as far as I'm concerned, like a rising tide raises all boats. So like I hope that people continue to come out with, stories about Loki and Sigyn and Angrboda, because like it's just going to like it's just going to keep getting better. Like
yeah.
And like, I love reading other people's interpretations because they're all so different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
And anyone who's listening, if you feel the call to, complete this challenge and make a happy Loki family book, then like DM me. I want to read it.
Yeah, same.
Like I know that, and granted, Kat, I've only obviously read The Goddess of Athena, and Lyra, I've only read the first book in your series because I have them all, like, physically, but I just have not gotten a chance to read them, and I'm so sorry. But if I learned after The Witch's Heart came out that there were people who, like, interpreted Loki, Angrboda, and Sigyn as a triad. And I was like, we could have had it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if somebody's written that book, I want to know about it.
I got that idea from Casey. because
Yes.
like
Yeah.
Casey was the one who was like exposing me to art they had made about like
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my god.
I know exactly the art that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was just
Their
like,
art
this
is,
is
like-
so good.
And it's so sweet and wholesome. Like, okay, see, Casey made the happy family.
Yeah. Well, Casey, get right.
Casey doing
Yeah.
the work.
Like
I know.
that is the thing. There's so many opportunities because all of these characters had a life outside of like the lines that we got, the little snippets. Like it's like when you're talking to your friend and you don't know how to pay your spouse a compliment, you only tell them about the bad things they've done. It's like the edits are almost the same thing, where like we don't hear about when they all went for a walk together and like got some apples and had a picnic. Like there's so many spaces for those things, and then meanwhile all of the rest of us are just sitting here like, okay, well, we need to sell books and have a plot, so I guess we better destroy them.
Yeah, it's if everybody was happy all the time, there would be no conflict and no plot. And that is kind of my whole thing with like the scene at the river and the witch's heart and like the whole like dynamic between Loki and, you know, his partners. Like, which is that like if Loki had decided at least like again like in my version of events, if Loki had been like, you know what, I'm going to have these two women meet and we're going to sit down and talk about this like adults. That could have avoided so much conflict later on. But no, like, they met the way they did, and then Roboto flew off the handle and made a terrible decision, and now everybody's screwed.
Yeah. But that's so much the myths, because I feel like that's what everyone does in the stories.
Fair
They
enough.
make bad decisions.
Yeah.
I feel like it's out of character to expect Loki to do something sensible.
Just
Like,
a little bit.
He
Sensible is not in his nature.
Or at least my Loki is like the kind of Loki who was like, okay, well, I predict this will end badly for me, so I will probably not do that, and then save his skin.
Yeah.
Never works out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, you know, Loki's just going to want to do what protects him a lot. I mean, again, you know, to, you know, maybe not have the pain, but in the end, it always backfires.
Yeah.
Like the joke is always on him in the end.
I think as well, one of the things that's interesting about Loki and like the family is just how many children there are, and like trying to work those children into like functional, fully formed characters, especially when some of them are not human. So like let's hear a little bit first about Fen, the vegan.
Yeah, I like I said, I try to do a what if scenario and have a little bit of fun with it. So yes, I made Fenrir more of a shapeshifter again after his father, so he can become the wolf. But otherwise, he's, you know, a person. But also he might be a vegan influencer.
That's incredible. That's the best thing I've ever heard.
But, you know, to me, I was just kind of thinking, like, let's have fun with this. Like, you know, if, you know, with the story of him with Tyr, like, is that really, you know, it was his friend and he caused him harm? Like, what would be the ramifications of that? Well, maybe that would have then caused him to go down this path of veganism to make up for it. Because, you know, I just never saw otherwise Fenrir as like I don't know, I feel he's more gentle. And that was like the point, which was so horrible about what the gods did to him.
Right.
The gods created their own end with how they treated Fenrir.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say with all of the kids. All three of actually all of the kids in general.
Yeah.
All 5 of them, I would say. Or I guess 6 if you include Sleipnir. I feel like people forget Sleipnir sometimes.
Yeah.
You guys don't. I did.
Well, I forgot to put him in the second book.
I kind of have.
Oh no.
I did my wrap up for book, like in book 2 I put like a wrap up at the start, and a friend was like, I don't want to like rock the boat, but is Horsey in here anywhere? Because I don't see anything. And I was like, sure. Just let me get to that.
But yeah, Sleipnir is kind of the forgotten one, sadly.
Poor buddy.
But when you have all the other ones as well, it's just like they kind of take over because they're just such big personalities and there's just so much to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Hel and and then Jormungand and just what are their stories? Where have they was with Jormungand been doing in the sea this whole time? What are his feelings? I feel like he might be a bit salty, no pun intended.
Right. I didn't purposely forget about Sleipnir. I just like wasn't sure what to do with him.
Yeah.
At a certain point. So
well, it's uncomfortable. It is a deeply uncomfortable thing to have to reckon with when you're sitting there, especially like I was going over all this stuff with my spouse, just rambling about this thing that I had to figure out and write, and he's just like, "Are you okay?" Like, no. This guy has to give birth to a horse. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yep. And I think that that's both like the intimidating part and the happy challenge with all of these characters is to figure out, like, especially beyond what little we were given, which is also very villainous. Like, all of these characters need to have a personality, and we can like imagine they were like quote unquote like fully formed human beings. And turning animal people into fully formed human people is a weird and exciting path to go down.
Yeah, it is.
So with my book personally, theme was really important to me. I'm a bit biased. When you are writing your books, were there any themes at the front of your mind as you were putting them together?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I feel like kind of basic, but for me, it's always been like about the different types of love and also like forgiveness. Not that we're there yet, I mean, but those are like what's always going in my head though when I am writing this series as far as themes go.
I guess for me, I don't think about theme really as I'm writing, at least as I'm writing the first draft. A lot of the times things just kind of happen, and then I'm like, oh, wait, that was the theme. Like, cause I'm a pantser, like at heart. So like I just fly by the seat of my pants when I'm writing. So a lot of the things that ended up being themes of the witch's heart were kind of things that were already in the source material, like inheritance, legacy, because that was Odin's whole thing, right? Is that like, oh, okay, like this inevitable catastrophe is going to happen. What can I do to make sure that everything that I have built continues on after I'm gone? And in a way, like Angerboda kind of does the same thing. So that ended up being huge in the second half of the book, which I rewrote several times before my publisher was happy with it. But yeah.
Well, and I feel like also maybe another thing for all of us possibly also be family, going off of what we were discussing before.
Yes. Yeah. For me, a lot of the things like I think I would be safe to argue that mine is the darkest book of the three. And for me, a lot of what I was doing, even if I didn't recognize it at the time, was trying to make this like very cathartic, deep look at like people that you trust that like don't always deserve your trust. And like there are probably, by the time I'm done, like 20 different themes that I ended up putting in there. But as far as like love goes, like that was something that was important to me, because at the time that I was writing it, I was feeling like I had seen a lot of happily ever afters, but I kept wondering what a story looked like after happily ever after, because a lot of these like books or movies that we're watching, the couple gets together and you are made to presume that they're happy forever. And it did not feel like what I was experiencing in my life, where I, several times in a year, we would be like, my spouse and I would be like unhappy or just neutral, and like hard things would happen. And I'm like, okay, but like what happens after the curtain closes? And especially in line with the mythologies of like, if I'm going to write about Loki's spouse, there's no way that she is happy with all this shit that he is doing.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think, that's a particular challenge with Sigyn, because she has to put up with so much, and like how do you tackle that?
Yeah.
Especially without like making her then, a doormat.
Right.
And that was something that for me was important as well, was like when I was coming up with who this character would be, because we had so little to go off of, I was so sick of seeing the interpretation of her being like that she was a child bride and a battered spouse, and like I wasn't seeing any interpretations that were like, yeah, she had a husband, she really liked him, and he thought she was a pretty good wife. Like the basic foundation you want for a relationship of like respect and some form of adoration, I just wasn't seeing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's possible
no,
to end the realms and still like your spouse, right? Like you can do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean also you can like them but still be pissed at them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's basically Sigyn 100% of the time.
Accurate.
And that's something like I tried to tap into with, my interpretation of that relationship. And you know what? It's hard. Mm-hmm. It's like a really delicate balance because it can easily go one way or another. So yeah, especially with Loki as the spouse.
Yeah, there are things that happen with Loki that, like, presumably if I was in a relationship with a human being that did that kind of crap, that I would have been fed up a long time before we hit Ragnarok. One of the themes that I personally found that stuck out to me about The Witch's Heart was, like, one that I hadn't gone looking for and one that I wasn't expecting, which was, like, this sense of motherhood. Like, I personally am not someone who desires to have children, and yet this hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, me too.
I also do not have a desire to have children, which surprises people after reading The Witch's Heart. Yeah, I don't know what I can say about that. It just kind of came out as I was writing, and not just because like that's basically all we know about Angrboda is that she was mother to these 3 children, but that just kind of like came out as like part of her personality, was that she also just loves her kids.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of happened.
I think that like that makes it almost better that it was kind of like her character telling it rather than like something you set out to do, because it felt very authentic and it felt very like it was very powerful, and that's coming from someone who again has very little mothering instinct.
Yes. Same, and thank you.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the feelings you were getting out of me.
Yep. Made me question my life decisions, and I like hung out with a kid and went,
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because I also found myself writing kids and pregnancy and things that like I didn't expect to write, but like they come with the territory, and it was a very interesting experience, and I've been really lucky that like I've had readers who have been pregnant or have had children who were able to like step in and tell me where I was going wrong.
Yes, I had same here. Yep.
See, on the flip side, I'm noticing like I touched a bit on it in my second book, but now like as I'm getting in the fourth, I'm noticing a lot of themes as far as fathers and sons. And those kind of relationships, which it's intriguing to me. I did not expect to be here. But it's I've been enjoying, seeing those dynamics and exploring that, and kind of like even getting to connect more with some of my family or friends, asking about like with their, relationship with their fathers and vice versa. And so it's been interesting.
That was one of the things that even though I wasn't working in Loki's point of view for the first book, it was important to me that Loki had a really good relationship with his kids. Even if in the end he's not the most trustworthy person, that he helps bring about the end of everything. Like I thought that Loki as a person should be doing the dishes and mopping the floor and like hanging out with his kids. Like as a basic, like this is what fathers should be doing regardless of how criminal a mastermind they are.
Yeah. And I know for me, it's just always been like, I mean, he's gonna always do all this bad stuff because it's just him. But like at the core, he does love all of his children. In my interpretation, deep down, like he does love them. Doesn't stop him from doing crap, but
like in mine, it does not stop him from having a rocky relationship with at least one of his kids. But like, the intention is there, and I think that's probably more about me and just my feelings about like family dynamics than it is about Loki. But if you're not self-inserting something into your work, like, what are you doing?
Yes. Because I mean, I've seen many times in different family dynamics, that the parent deeply loves the child, but like it does not, like you said, it does not stop them having a bad relationship. It's just from different things or misunderstandings, and it's a whole can of worms there.
Yeah. I think as well, we have like not the one person we haven't spent like all that much time on, ironically, is Angrboda.
Yeah.
And that reflects my book one for sure, that I like she was there, but not as present as she is in many other topics just because I had to keep her secret. So let's talk about her and her side of things.
Yeah.
You're the professional.
I don't know. What am I supposed to say about her?
This is the hard part about like talking about the work, right? Like, not only is it a while ago, especially like even if you released it yesterday, the work was still a while ago. Like, a lot of people don't understand how much time happens between final draft and like release. And you're like, did I write that book?
Right.
Yeah.
Feels like somebody else did it. Like in a different lifetime.
I just to kind of jumpstart it, I mean, I feel like again we each have a very different view of Angrboda. I mean, they're similar, but there's big differences. Like, I have her more in book 3 than the other ones, but I thought that was kind of interesting, our interpretations. I mean, they're still the core of her, I think, in all of ours, but otherwise we did take a different interpretation.
Yes. And it's really interesting how differently like we can interpret these characters, and yet they all like have the same vibe, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have a giant poster in my office of Angrboda, and she looks nothing like how I picture her, but the vibes are there.
Yeah.
I think it's one of Johann Egerkranz's like prints.
Okay.
And she looks so like skeletal and creepy and awesome. And I'm like, this isn't how I see her, but that's how I feel her. Does that make any sense?
It does. Yes, 100%.
It's like a lot of, like, I've seen like a lot of interpretations of her as like this, like kind of like big buff warrior. And there's like absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, more power to you. As long as the vibes are there, I'm on board. Count me in. I'm in.
Like, I know I tried to make her, again, a mother, but also fierce, but like some elegance to her and a little bit of mystery.
Right.
And she's also just kind of very independent, kind of doing her own thing.
Right. And there's different ways of being fierce as well.
Yes.
It's not just like punching people in the face. Like, there's also kind of like a quiet strength to her that I feel like vibes especially with me. So.
And that's what I love so much about your interpretation was that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, and that meant a lot to me also to see represented, because I feel like, I don't know, especially with female characters, you don't, I don't know, you just don't see that as much.
Right, because the only way to be a strong woman is to like perform violence, right? Physical violence. And that has always been something that's kind of bothered me. Because I think, like, Sigyn is just as strong, like, in every way. Like, in my mind, like, they are like equal, like of equal strength.
Yeah.
But like not physical strength, more like strength of character and strength of like conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I really agree with that, and especially for someone that chose to be with Loki, you have to then be strong.
Yes.
Right.
With my interpretation of it, like, having such like, I mean, it's a first person POV with Sigyn, and I chose particular paths to make sure that she got real angry by the end. But when I was coming at the character of Angrboda, I wanted her to be strong, and as well, like, I did go that kind of like more violent, punchy route, specifically because I have so many characters who are non-violent, or like they do some magic or something like that, and I figured like this would really balance that out. And as well,
Totally agree with that decision.
She for me, like, the core of her, for like what I both needed her to do, and as well, like, what I saw her as, was this person who would do anything to protect her kids, but also had like a vendetta to solve.
Yes.
And like,
Yeah.
if you've got a grudge that big, like, you go big or go home. And at the time, as that vendetta is like kind of coming to fruition, Loki's also got like a bone to pick, and like they made a good team that way.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also can really just picture her like minding her own business on the day-to-day, out in the woods with her kids, like in a little garden, and like just living a life that if she had been like left undisturbed, like, she would not have needed that violent streak that I had to give her.
Yep,
Yeah.
I subscribe to that 100%.
Yeah.
Leave Angrboda alone.
Yeah. And I also, I know for me, I tried to think also about just that, she's from Jotunheim, and what does that mean? What is like the culture of Jotunheim, or the climate? Like, how does that affect her and her personality? And I had fun kind of doing that as well with her, and also with all the characters. Like, I tried to think about where they're from and how does it affect them as people, or how they were raised, and outlook, like that.
Which it's sometimes like easier said than done, especially when you're like, they're from a culture that you have not needed to expand too deeply on for your work, and then you have to like come up with that, even though you're never going to show it on paper.
Yeah.
Yep. I for fun, I have written a little bit from Scotty's perspective, and like it just makes me want to rewrite the witch script.
Oh, that's the danger, though, right?
Yeah.
Anytime
Right?
you figure out what you could have done better, and you're like, I could just
Yes.
rewrite this whole book.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
But once it's out, it's out. You can't take it back.
Yeah, you can make a second special edition.
Right.
I think it's fine.
Retcon some things, it'll be fine. Actually, my POV character was just wildly misinterpreting this.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can pull it off.
It'll be fine. It's just for fun. So nobody hold me to it. It's not actually a thing with a capital T, but like it's just something I've been just playing around with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is sometimes there are things that stick in your head that you have to put on paper, and it's really satisfying, but is never like going to be good enough for public consumption.
Yes, absolutely. And some characters just won't let you go. And I think all three of us have had that experience writing on this subject.
Yeah. I actually picture myself like, after the 15th of November, this series is done for me. Like, it's over, and I am ready. I'm deeply ready, and I also picture myself in like a couple years wanting to be back in it, because it has gripped me that deeply.
Yep.
Well, it looks like we do need to start wrapping things up. We're going to be coming up on our hour. Thank you both for being here, and thank you to everyone who decided to tune in and listen. I'm going to link everything below for everyone's convenience, but Genevieve, where can we find your work, and do you linger on social media anywhere?
Yes, you could check out my website at GenevieveGornichec.com. I do have a newsletter now. Finally, if you're my publicist and you are listening to this, you didn't hear that. I also am on Instagram at Jen Gornichec and on Twitter at Jen Gornichec. But I usually hang out on Instagram more, and I try to respond to everything. So that's the best place to find me, is Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you. Lyra, how about you?
So you can find me at lyrawolf.com. I also have a newsletter that I sometimes send out. Sometimes I don't.
What a mood.
Yep.
But I do have one. You can also find me on like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok because I'm that cool. It's all with the same handle at Lyra Wolf Author. And again, you can find my books really in anywhere online, in bookstores. You can have them ordered. So again, like my series is The Nine Worlds Rising, Book 1, Truth and Other Lies. It's definitely fun and not causing pain whatsoever.
Yeah, that is definitely something that's true and not made up.
The lie detector says nothing. It has no issues with this. And for myself, you can find me at ketrector.com. I have active social media accounts, mostly on TikTok these days. I do a little shit posting over on Twitter, and occasionally I'm on Instagram, but TikTok is the place that I'm at now. And I also have a newsletter that my calendar reminds me every month that I need to do. So you can sign up for that, and all the links will be below. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for listening to us ramble about the things we love the most. Thank you, and have a happy Norse November. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.